Hello, everyone. Happy Black History Month. My name is Eli with Latinx and Gaming, and we want to thank our friends over at Geeks of Color for putting us on for our Game Dev Spotlight series. So today we have with us Jarory. Jarory, how are you feeling today?
I'm feeling great. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for joining us. And if I'm not incorrect, you're a developer at Respawn. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, so you got to tell me a little bit about Respawn because Star Wars is in my blood. It's in my body. I live it and breathe it. How do you enjoy working at Respawn?
I love it. Working at Respawn feels really good. I feel like I have a lot of stake in what I'm doing.
Mm.
And I get to work on the coolest IP for a nerd, right? I read all the Star Wars books as a kid. I think I probably know more about Star Wars than half my coworkers, to be honest. I'm a huge Star Wars nerd, so getting to bring that story to life and help it, tell a Star Wars story feels really good. It's like a childhood dream come true.
I'm over here just stars in my eyes, literally, because that would be my dream as well. So let's talk about your journey to become a developer. So, what inspired you to get into games? What was your pathway to get to Respawn?
Sure. I have a kind of an odd path into games. My bachelor's is in anthropology. I was studying biomedical anthropology, to be exact. I was really interested with human evolution and disease and how those things kind of intersect, as well as mental health. And I went to do a PhD at SUNY Binghamton in upstate New York.
Mm-hmm.
I hated it. I couldn't stand academia. There were so many
Oh no!
politics and pettiness and like
Ah,
cutthroat. It was awful. And so I dropped out. Summer vacation came around after my first year, and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. Um, and I was looking for something to do. I didn't know what to do with my life, and I had always heard that I was always good with computers as a kid, and I always heard that programming is one of those like, oh, you can learn this in your garage and like, become famous like Bill Gates or whatever. And so I tried it. I tried my hand at programming and realized I was really good at it.
oh
In
wow!
the process, I ended up building a pseudo game. I started learning Unity because I wanted to work on like AR stuff, which was like,
Yeah, augmented realities. Yeah.
yeah, Unity is really good for that. And I was doing it for Android specifically because I wanted to
Oh
be an
okay.
Android developer in AR in the
Yeah,
AR
yeah, yeah.
space. And I ended up building a game that was like Pokemon Go conceptually, but not in execution, right? Like it was nowhere near the polish or anything like that, but it had the ideas and the scaffold there. Um, and that got me a couple jobs as like a programmer in other
Mm-hmm.
spaces. And while I was working, I was like kind of unsatisfied because working on my own app was fun, but working for this company is like electronic data, which
Yeah.
is a very generic name for a very generic company. Um, I was really bored and I started watching videos on YouTube and I picked up Extra Credits. I don't know if
Oh
you're
yeah.
familiar with that series. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They did an episode on like game schools and how you can tell if like a game school is creditable and what's not. So I looked it up. I was like, all right, I doubt that I was living in Florida in St. Petersburg at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I doubt there's any in Florida, but if there is, I'll apply. That was my thing.
Gotcha.
Turns out the number two school for graduate game development programs in the country, now number one, but number two at the time, is at the University of Central Florida. It's called the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy. And I took that as a sign. So I applied, got in, wasn't sure if I was going to go even after I got in until I went and visited the campus, saw everything they were doing, fell in love with the program. And that's how I got my start in games, was by joining the school, doing a year long or year and a half to 2 years long program where you by the end of it you build and ship your own title. So
Yeah,
my
yeah, yeah.
first title is this little 3D puzzle platformer in the vein of like Spyro called Scamp Hi Hat Havoc. I worked with a medium sized team.
I gotta pause you real quick because I want to hear more. What was Scamp? What kind of creature was it?
Scamp is
What?
this little demon imp thing.
It was an
It's
imp. Wow, I would have gone
yes.
with like a squirrel or a chipmunk. I wouldn't have gone to demon, but I like that. I like
No,
that a
he's
lot.
great. We modeled his personality. So during that project, I was the narrative lead,
Oh,
and because I really always have been a storyteller, I've been
mm-hmm,
writing
mm-hmm.
for as long as I can remember. I started with poetry in like the sixth grade, and I've always been telling stories. And so even though I could do the programming, I really wanted to do the writing and the
Yeah,
narrative. And so I took that on in addition to my other technical duties. Uh,
amazing.
and we modeled that character after Rocket Raccoon, and I watched Guardians of the Galaxy like 6 times just to get that personality
Just to
right.
get that, yeah, to get the mannerisms and kind of the atmosphere and quips, kind of right.
I think I if you It's free. You can take a look at it. But yeah, that was my start. We shipped that title, and that landed me a job at on Madden 20 back in
Okay.
like
Yeah.
2018. And that was my first game dev experience. It was basically a lot of people from FIA end up at Tiburon
Yeah, at
in
EA, yeah.
Orlando.
Yeah, of course.
So, it felt the same. It's just like FIA 2, as some call it.
Yeah.
Um,
Gerard, you don't know this about me, but many of the Fians also end up at my studio, Iron Galaxy. So
yep.
we didn't know I didn't know that about you before now, but that's really cool. We probably know a lot of the same people. This is our first time
Exactly.
meeting everyone watching this, but please let's talk about that journey more. So it sounds like you're a programmer, right? Are you a gameplay programmer? What specifically is your day to day at Respawn right now?
So at Respawn, I'm actually a narrative designer right now, and this is
Oh,
where the
cool.
journey gets really interesting because
Yeah, tell me. Yeah,
I started off at Tiburon, what's called a technical designer. That's like a
yeah.
hybrid program designer role.
Hmm.
Because I really wanted to get into narrative. And so I ended up being on the narrative team as this like tools developer for them kind of
Okay.
thing.
Yeah, of course.
I built out the interface for the scenario engine in Madden 20. So when we wanted to write a new scene, you could just push a button and it would stand the whole scene up. And it was really cool.
That
I
is
was really proud
amazing.
of that. And then I ended up doing some software work for a casino gaming studio before moving to Scopely, working on Marvel Strike Force. Again, technical designer, and pushing really hard to be on the narrative syncs and being part of
Mm,
narrative and
mm.
doing all of that. I eventually left there for a small startup called Elodie, where I was doing the same thing, technical design, and also doing more narrative work now, right?
Yeah.
They didn't have a narrative team. So I was like, I set up their initial narrative systems, which eventually caught the attention of Respawn. And they're like, hey, we need a narrative designer. And I was like, this is what I wanted to do my entire career. I felt bad leaving
Yes.
LED because it was a great studio. LED was an
Yeah.
amazing place to work. They really care about diversity. They really care about their employees. They really care just about everything they do, and I loved that about them. So it's very hard to leave LED, but this was my chance to do the thing that I've been trying to do my entire career.
I
So
hear
I
you.
took it at
Yeah.
a heartbeat.
Yeah. So Elodie, how do you spell that if people want to Google it and find it? If that's
Elodie.
Thank you. Thank you. Because, this is maybe a great studio that some other people trying to enter the industry could end up at someday. So you sound like you're very happy at Respawn. I'm glad that your journey, like, yeah, like you said, like, I think a lot of people that end up in the games industry don't really have that one like linear path where it was just like, hey, I knew from day one I was going to be a gameplay systems programmer or a UI person. And then I just went straight at that and got hired at that and just did that. Right. I think many of us are many hat wearers. And I really love your journey there because I'm sure a lot of the stuff that you learned in academia or with anthropology type stuff, you probably add that and like weave that into your narrative design, right?
Absolutely. As a storyteller, um, you know, studying culture and people, which is what anthropology is about,
Mm,
really helps you understand how to tell a story because you can dig deeper into the psychology of the characters. You can understand not just like what would a character do, but what would a character do if he lived in this culture, right?
yeah.
Star Wars is a great example, right? Because
Hmm.
there's all these alien cultures with these different concepts, and so what would someone who has no concept of any of our earthly, ideas, how would they
Tethers, yeah.
yeah, how would they respond to seeing an alien that to them is commonplace, right? They would probably
Hmm.
respond to him like an old friend. And so you got to keep that in mind when writing and designing these characters.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's funny that you mentioned that because while we're recording this, it's the weekend that Horizon Zero Dawn came out. So I know that like that anthropology side of stuff is really probably valuable to the designers that make Horizon because it's in another world, right? It's in a world after humanity, right? So I think there's a lot of cool things that tie in that way. On the Star Wars side, I was going to tell you, I think people recognizing how like wrong the Jedi are often and how it leads to their downfall is like kind of like once you recognize that you're like, oh, like that's going to make you enjoy Star Wars in different ways. Like our heroes can be flawed, and I kind of love that. And then I
Hmm.
really love the end, and I know it's a controversial movie and not everyone loves the Last Jedi as much, but I love you know the anecdote at the end of like anyone could wear the mask. You could wear the mask, kind of like the Into the Spider-Verse thing, right? It's like
Hmm.
some kid just picks up a broom and he's just like it's just this like just some kid on some planet has the powers of the Force, and I love that kind of way that Star Wars welcomes people in. I think.
I think so. I love that about it. For the record, The Last Jedi is actually my favorite Star Wars film, which I know a lot of people are gonna,
Thank you.
get on me for
No,
it.
I
But
love you for that. Thank you.
I also love Rogue One, right? I
Yeah.
have I'm of the opinion that like Star Wars is fun. It's not here to, shatter anyone's like expectations or anything. But what I loved about The Last Jedi is that they did do some expectation
Mm.
shattering things, um, and I had a good time while watching it. And I think the story they try to tell may get a little like there's that Kanto bite sequence, which I think goes on for a beat too long.
Yeah.
Um, but I think overall, all these subversive ideas they bring to the table is something Star Wars needed to be fresh
Mm.
again. The Force Awakens was a good film, but it was just the last, A New Hope again,
For a new
you know,
generation, yeah.
for a new generation. And so they needed something fresh, and that's what I loved about The Last Jedi.
Awesome. Well, then let's get back to you because we could talk Star Wars all day, I'm sure. Now I want to be your best friend, like I said before, because the Fire connection, the Star Wars stuff. But tell me about your background, and does that really play into the decisions that you make at work, or like what? How does that inform the work that you do? Your cultural background and you as a person.
Absolutely. So I come from an Afro-Latin background.
Hmm.
My family is Puerto Rican and black and very mixed. If you take a look at a panel of me and my cousins, right,
Yeah.
like you have skin tones from like the palest of the pale to the darkest of the dark, and we just run the gamut of color because Puerto Ricans by nature are a mix of indigenous white and black,
Mm.
just by virtue of kind of how the island came and its history.
Of course.
Um, and so having that background, I think it informs me most in the advocacy work I do. Um, a lot of, for example, I'm a community organizer for Black in Gaming, in addition to being a member of Latinx in Gaming. Um, but I also sit on the diversity council at Respawn,
Mm.
and I work with the outreach team as well as the narrative team to like focus on how do we tell more diverse stories, how do we have more diverse characters in our game, and I'm also an advocate for getting more diverse developers on the team to tell those stories.
Hmm.
Uh, my boss has learned very quickly that I am not one to not speak my mind. I will definitely say if call things out, and he's grown to appreciate that, especially when it comes to diversity. Right? It's like, hey, I think like I called them out on some job description stuff once, and he was like, "That's actually great insight." When one of the biggest issues for to me for getting more game devs of color involved is always the job description, right? When
Mm-hmm.
you're asking for all these detailed list of like we want this and this in experience for an entry level position, you're turning off people who have non-traditional routes into the industry, and a
True.
lot
True.
of game devs of color don't have traditional routes into the industry.
Hmm. Especially the with the journey that you highlighted yourself. I'm really glad that you're passionate about that work. Myself, I find just using like gender decoders to make things kind of more neutral and balanced for people as they're reading things. I think that's really important. If you could like pinpoint one thing that you think is like something that you're trying to push forward in either illuminating people of color in the industry or something that you're just like, hey, this is the thing that we kind of need to figure out. Because I really identified with what you said earlier, right? The speaking up aspect, right? Because for too long I think it was just like a just sit in the room and be quiet while some like casual racism is happening and you're just like, yep, this is just how these offices are. But then like
Mhm.
now I think like you, I have become a little more bold, and I'm not at the same level maybe as you yet. We're like, oh, Jarory's gonna say something, like that's not where I'm at, but I do consider it, and I do like make sure to bubble it up to leadership now. But how do you find that, like that courage, I guess?
Um, I mean, part of it is just my history. I grew up very poor.
Mm.
I grew up, in the projects. I grew up very out. I was raised by a mother who, she encouraged me to be active in activism.
I love that. I love
In
that.
college, for example, I helped start an Occupy movement at my university
Wow.
during my sophomore, junior year, something like that. And actually had a piece written about me for it. It was really cool.
Heck yeah, yeah. Well, one,
Uh,
shout out to moms because she did a great job with you. So shout out, mom. Gotta say that first. And I know
mhm.
my first question was really about like, what's one thing that you think we need to do to move the ball forward, right? Or like that one thing that you're kind of focusing on. What would that be?
I want to see more game devs of color and more women in positions of
Mm.
leadership. More non-binary folk in positions of leadership. Uh, I think the people like it's very. I think it's becoming more accessible for game devs from disenfranchised backgrounds to get into the industry.
Hmm.
But then there's that next step, which is being the decision makers. And that's where I see a lot of slowdown in the process, right? Because people want years of experience for that, and these disenfranchised groups don't have the leg up that a lot of straight cis white men
Hmm.
have had in this industry for years.
Of course, of course. Yeah. So I think on my end, I'm totally jiving with you on the elevating people like us to leadership, right? People who might be inspired by this Black History Month chat to those leadership levels. Because you're right, right? Like if it takes 10 years for you to get the experience, for you to be in that position of leadership, right? Then it's going to be another 10 years before the next generation, right? Before there's
Hmm.
more opportunities and more opportunities. So then how were you supported by your community as you kind of rose through the ranks?
Sure. Being a member, particularly in Black and Gaming, I've been really supported by a lot of the community organizers in like
Hmm.
getting resources and information and like support when I was early in my career. And now that I'm about 4 or 5 years in, it's more one of the this is a kind of a side thing, but outside of work, I'm working on trying to tell unique stories that are in games that wouldn't
Hmm.
get told otherwise. I'm starting with this
Gotcha.
hip hop game because I don't think hip hop is represented in this medium very frequently.
No, it's a dance game, or it's like a
Right.
Def Jam
So
fighting game or something like that. It's
exactly.
it's played for laughs, not for depth.
Right, and so I'm making like a hip hop RPG, which is about
Yeah.
being, it's about a DJ fighting aliens. It's very old school 1990s style Chrono Trigger,
Yeah.
very s game. And so, but the community has been very supportive. They've been doing playtests for me, feedback, shouting out the tweets that I send out when I do it and stuff like that. And so I think one of the best parts about being involved in like Latinx in gaming and Black in gaming has been just the immense support I receive in my personal endeavors to tell these
Hmm.
stories. Not so much in like the corporate world, although, and I think a large part of that is because there's just not a lot of us at the higher levels in corporate to begin with.
True, true, very true. Yeah. Yeah, I'm probably the only person of Mexican descent in the leadership team where I'm from. So yeah, like I totally agree with you there. I guess I do want to talk to you about other people that inspire you within the industry. This could be content creators. This could be other, Black game developers, Latinx game developers. Who are some of the people that you're like looking to as like that's where I want to be. That's where I want to get to.
A while ago, when I first started out at FIA, there was a guy who had graduated from FIA as well,
Hmm.
and he started his own studio. His name's Hezekiah. He's actually a good friend of mine, but I looked up to him a lot as like a man. This guy's doing it right. He's got his own studio. He's making the games he wants to make. He's telling the stories that
Hmm.
he thinks needs to be told. He's got a team, and I was like, that's where I want to be. And I've gone to him for quite a bit of advice since then. Now that I've been exposed to more game developers outside of that FIA circle,
Yeah.
there are other individuals who I look up to as well. One guy, Travis, he won a award, like a lifetime achievement award from Black in Gaming during the big awards, and
Awesome.
I think the man is just so insightful, and he knows so much about production of a game. I give him shit all the time, and he gives me shit all the time. But like, it's a friendly kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I really look up to him, and I think people like him who have been in this industry for 30 years and are of melanated color are rare, and so seeing someone in that position is really inspiring to me to be like, okay, this is possible.
Like, yeah, you could get there. You could do that too.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, are there any other shout outs that you want to give? Any other organizations or companies or groups that you just think are can't miss things that could help other people potentially get hired in the industry?
Yeah, one of the things that really helped me early on in my career was going through a lot of like recruiters.
Yeah, of course.
Uh, there's one in the UK, I think it's called Datascope.
Mm.
They helped me get my resume kind of nice and tight, right? They gave
Mm,
me a lot of
mhm,
feedback on my
mhm.
resume early on, which was very helpful. Um, I also really appreciate a couple of like smaller Discord groups that have been very useful.
Yeah.
There's um, Black Game Dev Pros, which a lot
Mhm.
is more for like more focused on Black streamers, but there are some development
People in there.
organizers in there. Yeah. There's also the Game Industry Gatherings, which is shortened called GIG. And I have met so many talented, wonderful developers through GIG who have just been incredibly supportive. And they do a once a month Friday meeting where people jump on. It's a Zoom call, and they break you out to breakout rooms to chat with people. It's fantastic, and I think that organization deserves a lot more support. I need diverse is that really supportive to Tanya, the individual who runs it, and they've helped me like kind of know where to position myself a little better in the industry. Um, and then the guys who run the Game Does a Color Expo, I think, are also pretty fantastic. And I haven't met them, and I would love to meet. I think it's Sean Alexander is the guy who's like head in charge of that. I would love to meet him someday and just pick his brain, but that's a future goal.
Well, I hope that you reach all of these goals. And then I'm going to throw up your Twitter one more time for everybody to see so they can find you and follow you and support your endeavors. I want to close out getting back to Star Wars again. So I know you can't tell us any of your NDA work, but are you excited about the things that you're doing these days?
Absolutely.
Are you happy? So
what I can say is that I'm working in the Star Wars Jedi franchise, the same one that Fallen Order took place in. And we are taking the series with fresh eyes and kind of a like, we don't want the players who played the previous game to feel their skills are not being useful, and so we're transferring a lot of things that like should feel familiar to the player, but we're also really looking at new ways to engage the player, and I'm really excited for some of what we've come up with. When EA eventually makes announcements, I would love to talk more about what we're doing. But until then, I'm just going to say it's really cool.
Awesome. So you're like Luke Skywalker right now with the lightsaber, throwing it over your shoulder, letting the past die. I get it. No, I'm just kidding. That's not what you're saying. But I can't wait. I'm a big fan of Star Wars, and I'm a big fan of you now. I did not know about the Faya connection. I'm so glad that we got to share kind of your story a little bit and your, follow here for Twitter with everybody who's watching on the old Geeks of Color network. Thanks again, Latinx and Gaming, and thank you, Jarory, for being here today. Can people reach out to you? Can they ping you?
Absolutely.
Can they bug you?
Anyone can follow me on Twitter. If you're looking to get into the industry or are in the industry and want advice, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty sure I'm the only Jarory out there, so I should be very easy to find. And I love helping people. It's how I give back to a world that has helped me so much. And so I hope anyone who wants, even if you're curious, like if you can do this, reach out to me. I'll talk to you.
I love it so much. Happy Black History Month. Thank you again for being here, Jarory.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye.